Welcome to the Celiac Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Cordero, and this is where we get real about life with celiac disease. Each week, I'll share practical gluten-free tips, wellness hacks, and honest conversations about the emotional side of living with an autoimmune condition. Think of this as your weekly mix of support, relatability, and inspiration to help you not just survive, but thrive with celiac. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, I'm not a medical professional. Everything I share is based on my own experience living with celiac disease. This podcast is not medical advice, so please always consult your doctor about your own health. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Celiac Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Cordero, and it's 2026. Happy New Year. I hope everyone had an amazing holiday break and start to the new year. I seriously can't believe it's 2026, but I really wanted to do an episode all about drinking in dry January, in the spirit of dry January, because I know that's like the thing on everyone's lips right now. I was in the office today and a bunch of my coworkers were talking about how they're doing it. I decided to do it. So I thought it'd be a good, poignant podcast episode to kick off January with you guys. Yeah, I also have posted a few videos on social media on the podcast, Instagram, and TikTok. Shout out at Celiac Diaries Pod, talking about drinking alcohol with celiac disease. And I've gotten so many comments from you guys about how that's just such a hot topic in the autoimmune disease community and the celiac disease community. And there's so much to unpack about it. So this is going to be a bit about dry January, but also just a bit about alcohol in general, how it affects you with an autoimmune disease like celiac disease specifically. So we're going to get into everything. And I just want to have a little disclaimer. As always, I say that I'm not a medical professional in my intro, but I also just want to say for this, I know this can be a sensitive subject. This is more just to have like an honest conversation about alcohol consumption with celiac disease. It's not to scare you. It's not to say what you should do or what you shouldn't do. I'm not, anti anything. I respect everyone's decisions, but I just think it's a really interesting conversation to have. Also, I saw this stat. Dry January participation is significant and growing, with roughly 1 in 4 U.S. adults abstaining from alcohol in January in 2025. And key findings also show that high engagement is within younger adults, especially Gen Z. And the reason behind Dry January is health, cancer awareness, and cost driving the trend. So interesting food for thought. Let's do my little fun segments of the week that we have. So first up, gluten-free fave of the week. Okay, in the spirit of drinking, this is kind of a little anti-dry January, but I'm obsessed with Element electrolytes. I honestly will have them if I'm drinking or if I'm not drinking because they're really good to just replenish your electrolytes if you work out or run a lot. But especially if I am drinking, I rely on these Element electrolytes to basically just cure my hangover, honestly. I will have these before a night out drinking and when I get back from a night out drinking and the morning after. And I really notice such a difference. I'm obsessed with Element. I love that brand. Lately, I've been really into the chocolate sea salt flavor because you can have them nice and warm. It kind of tastes like a salted hot cocoa in the winter, which is so amazing. So shout out Element. I'm their biggest fan. I have like a subscription to them on Amazon because I always need to be replenished with them. No pun intended. Next segment, we have our news of the week. So a new industry forecast reports that the global gluten-free alcoholic drinks market, which is currently valued at about $5.6 billion, is projected to grow to around $12.7 billion by 2033, increasing at roughly 8.5% annually throughout the decade. This growth is largely driven by rising consumer demand for gluten-free options, including beer, wine, cider, spirits, as more people are diagnosed with celiac disease or gluten intolerances, and broader audiences that aren't gluten intolerant or celiac just choose to be gluten-free for health and lifestyle reasons. And this article, I will link it in the show notes. It also highlights specifically figuring out what products and alcoholic drinks are gluten-free, because not all products labeled gluten-free are going to be equally safe for someone with celiac disease. So it is important to kind of do your research on that. I am going to mention a little bit more about that in this episode, but just food for thought for you guys. Definitely make sure that you're not just checking the ingredient list. It's just like any other label. You have to think about how it's made and if it really is going to be a celiac safe alcoholic drink. Okay, so getting into what I want to talk about for today's episode. First off, if you were like so confused, and sorry that I didn't explain this before, if you don't know what dry January is, you're probably like, what are you talking about, girl? But dry January is a relatively newer trend where people choose to abstain from alcohol for the month of January, kind of as like a New Year reset. A lot of times people like to do it in January because there might be less going on, less holiday celebrations. And specifically for me, I'm doing dry January because I went a little hard over the holidays with drinking, and I think my body is just kind of craving a reset. And I'm also kicking off my half marathon training this month, so I just think it's like a natural time for me to take a little alcohol break, and I'm excited to do dry January. A lot of my friends are doing it, so it makes it really easy because I don't feel like I'm going to be missing out on social plans or anything like that. So that's why I'm doing dry January. It's increasingly popular with Gen Z, which is my generation. So if you haven't heard of it, that is what it is. And I know this episode is coming out a few days after the start of January, but if you do want to do dry January and you haven't started yet, it's not too late to start. I don't think it has to be like the 1st through the 31st. Me and my friends, we were on a ski trip, as you might have seen if you follow me on social media outside of the podcast. And we did a little après on the 2nd of January, but following that, it is dry January. So it's never too late to start. But yeah, now that you know what dry January is, I want to get into specifically the relationship between celiac disease and alcohol. I'm going to get into how that's connected, all the gluten-free alcohol options that there are, how it's all tied to inflammation, trying to stay celiac safe while drinking, and just why alcohol might affect you more as people that have celiac disease or another autoimmune disease, because it is so valid. And I think a lot of people, as I've seen on comments on my social media, feel the same way. So I think this is a really relatable conversation. We're going to get into all of it. This is a very nuanced topic, so there's a lot to really discuss here. So let's start out with how celiac and alcohol are connected. Well, alcohol 101, alcohol is poison, and therefore it causes inflammation in the body. So just in general, alcohol is not the best thing for you, obviously, although it is so normalized and such a part of American culture. But at the end of the day, alcohol is a poison, and it creates an inflammatory response in your body. So if you have celiac disease and you already are prone to inflammatory responses and an autoimmune stress, bringing in alcohol into that can just be a lot of extra stress on the body if you don't manage it properly. And I'll get into more specifics about that later, but TLDR, alcohol is a poison. And at the end of the day, it's not good for anyone if we're being real. And if you have an autoimmune disease, it's easy for those negative effects of alcohol to just get compounded on your body. Okay, I really want to briefly talk about gluten-free alcohol options. So wine is a really popular gluten-free alcohol option. There is some gluten-free beer these days, but as I'm sure most of you know, regular beer is not gluten-free. That's basically pure gluten. And most distilled spirits are gluten-free. So like tequila, vodka, a lot of those should be gluten-free. Where you run into trouble is if you have any like malt flavorings or like barley malts, things like that. That sounds very glutinous. So in general, though, I think it's easy to find gluten-free alcohol. I mean, they have like so many canned seltzers these days that are gluten-free. But I think the hardest thing is once you get into trying drinks or worrying about cross-contamination at a bar with your drink. I think that's really what makes it difficult to be celiac safe while drinking, which is kind of like anything else with celiac disease. Finding the gluten-free options isn't really the hardest part. It's really managing the cross-contamination and cross-checking all of the ingredients and making sure that you're not missing anything. So I think the tips that I've learned for staying celiac safe while drinking is to just not order a craft cocktail. I keep it very simple. I focus on just like a typical drink, like a tequila soda or a martini. Those are my go-tos. My friends know that. Or just like a plain wine. Like I love a glass of Pinot Grigio or a glass of red wine. I think just keeping things very simple. And, I used to love margaritas. I used to love ordering whatever fun drink is on the menu. But at this point, it makes more sense for me to just keep things simple and order drinks that I don't really that aren't just like going to complicate things, because it can be easy to find gluten-free alcohol, but then you don't know if it's a celiac safe environment. Like maybe the margarita is gluten-free, but the shaker that they shake the margarita in is not gluten-free. So there's a lot of factors. So I think for me and my anxiety and just having a good peace of mind about drinking while having celiac disease, it's best to just order a very simple item with like 2 ingredients max, if I can help it. And I also think that's my tip for staying celiac safe while drinking. But I also think it's just a good thing. Like even if you don't have celiac disease, I think it's good to keep your drinks simple, because drinking alcohol is going to be inflammatory. And when you add on all of these like sugary cocktails, like a margarita, there's so much sugar in that, which, obviously is fine, but that's just adding to the overall inflammation of the drink. It makes your hangovers worse if you have added sugars in your cocktails. So just keeping drinks simple in general, even if you don't have celiac disease, just helps your body process the alcohol better and lowers your overall inflammation. And if I'm not a calorie counter, but if you are conscious about calories, you're drinking less calories and not, going overboard with a really sugary cocktail that's like, I don't know, sometimes it can be like 500 calories for one drink, which is kind of a lot. So as I mentioned, I used to love margaritas. Now I'll just order a ranch water or a tequila soda instead to keep it very simple. And alcohol is like my little treat of the night. And if I know that I'm drinking that night, I will be intentional about the rest of my diet and make sure that I'm not having like a bucket full of ice cream and that I'm kind of treating the drink or the cocktail as my dessert. So I'm like minimizing any other added sugars or inflammatory foods that are going to just make my response worse the next morning. I'm really thinking about this in a strategic way about how I'm going to feel the next day, and not just how things are going to taste or feel that night, which is just kind of how you have to be with celiac disease. And then, as I mentioned earlier in my gluten-free fave of the week, I love Element. I have a little pre-post drink routine, so I'll make sure to eat something and to not drink on an empty stomach, because that's just gonna make your inflammation worse. And then I also will have some post-drink electrolytes and try to sober up before I go to sleep so that I don't compromise my sleep. So that's kind of my little spiel on gluten-free alcohol and how to drink safely with celiac disease and also lower your chances of inflammation, even though, of course, drinking alcohol is inherently inflammatory. All right, so now I want to talk about why alcohol might affect you more with celiac disease. So, as we've discussed a lot on the pod, celiac disease, as we all know, is an autoimmune disease, and that creates a response in your gut and your small intestines. And that's just kind of a baseline that people with celiac disease are at. Obviously, with the gluten-free diet, you can heal your celiac disease. But at the end of the day, if you have celiac disease, you're more prone to gut irritation and inflammation. Alcohol is a gut irritant. It is inflammatory, and it is metabolized by systems that are already under stress for many celiacs. I'm not going to get into all of the technicalities of this. Of course, do your own research, but that's just kind of the basics of it. Alcohol is causing stress on your body as well. And I think, the narrative that a lot of celiacs hear about alcohol is that if it's gluten-free, it's fine. And I think that's fair. I don't want to say that you shouldn't drink if you have celiac disease. That would be hypocritical of me to say, because I have celiac disease and I do enjoy an occasional drink, even though I'm doing dry January right now. But I do think there is a nuance. If you're newly diagnosed with celiac disease, if you're going through a rough patch with celiac disease, if your levels are high, I do think alcohol only adds to that stress, and like your gut is trying to heal, and it's trying to heal potentially decades of inflammation that you didn't know was happening. So I think adding anything else to that mix is just a lot. Last year, I went for an alcohol break for about 9 months whenever I was trying to just like focus on healing my gut, getting my celiac levels down. And I actually think it was really, really beneficial for me. And it also, I mean, I was at that point when I was drinking, I was only drinking sugary cocktails as my drinks. So I think also cutting out that really helped. But if you are trying to heal your gut, if you're newly diagnosed with celiac disease, I do think it is a really smart decision to cut out alcohol for a little bit just to help your body out and not stress it out more. There is that gut connection, and alcohol increases your gut permeability. If you've heard of leaky gut, very similar. And like, as I said, your gut lining is already vulnerable if you have celiac disease, and that healing of it takes time. And alcohol can just like worsen that inflammation, slow your gut healing, and increase your GI symptoms, even if you're gluten-free. So I think there's the nuance of, yes, you should be able to safely drink alcohol as, you know, as safe as the normal person. Obviously, there's going to be risks with alcohol if you are drinking gluten-free alcohol as someone with celiac disease, but there is that nuance of if you're not completely healed and your gut is still inflamed, you're kind of just exasperating that. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Separately, even if you are healed from celiac disease, you're on your strict gluten-free diet, obviously things can happen. And typically celiac patients have some sort of nutrient depletion, and they're, you know, taking some supplements to counteract that. And alcohol does interfere with absorption of nutrients, specifically calcium, magnesium, and B vitamins, which are some deficiencies that can be common with celiac, especially calcium. So because you have a higher risk of deficiency with celiac, it's already hard for your body to absorb all the nutrients that it needs. When you add alcohol into the mix, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. I mean, in general, for a quote unquote normal person, alcohol doesn't help anything, but especially if you have an autoimmune disease and your body's under stress, it's clearly not going to help. So this can affect your bone density, your energy and fatigue, your deficiencies, and can just have you feeling some celiac symptoms, even if you are completely gluten-free, just because your body is under a lot of stress, it's trying to heal, and it's going through a lot. So that's just important to know and to be aware of. And I think one of the reasons why I like doing dry January is because it kind of just gives you that time to recalibrate your body and give your body that reset. It's not like an all or nothing thing. It's just for 1 month. You're taking a break from alcohol, and it just helps you listen to your body more and yeah, just kind of have a little reset. And I think can be nice. So that's kind of another one of the reasons why I enjoy doing dry January. Another factor here is, and this is something I haven't talked too much on the podcast about, but there is a correlation with celiac disease and histamine sensitivity. And alcohol is very high in histamines, especially wine, which is interesting. And I kind of notice that sometimes because sometimes I will drink like 3 tequila sodas and feel completely fine the next day, but I'll have like 1 glass of red wine and wake up feeling absolutely awful. And I'm like, literally why? And, you know, it could be because of the histamine content. And alcohol in general is very inflammatory and high in histamine, but especially certain alcohols. So that could be something that's worth looking more into as well. But a lot of celiacs kind of have that reduced DAO enzyme activity and could be more sensitive to histamines, especially if you're still healing from celiac disease. So, you know, this could cause like having a puffy face after drinking, headaches, anxiety. I mean, pretty much all of the usual symptoms that you could have after drinking, but just a bit more exasperated. Another thing, again, that alcohol impacts in general is your hormones, especially if you're a woman. It can spike your cortisol, affect your estrogen metabolism, your blood sugar. And again, just with celiac, that hormonal disruption can feel amplified because you're already having trouble potentially with your hormones or your nutrient absorption. So I think with celiac disease, it can be common for us to just react more intensely to the alcohol that we drink. So this can show up as like anxiety, poor sleep, acne, puffiness, PMS, mental health and brain health effects, anxiety. And yeah, it's just important to be aware of that and know the risks. Again, like there's risks for anyone drinking alcohol disease. There's always going to be, some side effects. It's definitely not, the healthiest thing that a person can do, but it is very normalized. And I think it's just important to know that with celiac disease, it might impact you more, and you just need to be smart about the choices that you're making. I think I was just on a trip with some friends, and the night before I had a flight, I was like, okay, I know for sure I need to not drink tonight. All the rest of my friend group was drinking. And I mean, my friends are supportive. They weren't trying to pressure me or anything in any way, but they were like, oh, what do you mean you can't drink before your flight? And I was like, no, I know myself. I really don't need to drink the night before I wake up at 6 a.m. and go on a flight, because that's just going to put my body in a stress that I don't need. And I want to be nice to my body right now. So it's just important to know those things. As well with mental health, and I'm not going to get too much into this, but alcohol can just worsen your anxiety, mood swings, and brain fog. And again, as we discussed on the pod, there is that gut-brain connection with celiac disease. So if you're experiencing gluten-induced anxiety, that's only going to make it worse. Okay, I want to get more into my personal experience with celiac and alcohol. So, as I've mentioned, I was diagnosed at 11. I obviously was not drinking alcohol then. When I did start drinking alcohol, I didn't really think too much about which alcohol was gluten-free. I think it's kind of like a weird thing with your mind. You're like, how can a liquid have gluten in it? Because you think of gluten as bread, at least when you're first diagnosed. That's kind of how it's explained to you, how you explain it to people. So it's kind of a weird mentality to think about how there could be gluten in alcohol or drinks, but there totally can be. And I think it's just important to spread awareness about that you need to be checking if your alcohol is gluten-free, because a lot of alcohol is not gluten-free, especially beer. I think a lot of people know that, because what else is in beer except for gluten? But that's really important just for everyone to be aware of. I definitely, in college, I was having a lot of stomach issues, and I think a lot of it was because of cross-contamination and drinking. There was a lot of inflammation, a lot of not getting a lot of sleep. And it was just kind of like a recipe for disaster. But I have noticed that drinking too much alcohol will upset my stomach. My face will get puffy. I get poorer sleep. And this is maybe a little vain to say, but I feel like cosmetically, I don't look as pretty or as good. So there's that kind of factor to it as well. And I think, it's you don't get your beauty sleep. When you take care of your body, you will obviously look better. So I think I've noticed that. And obviously I took a break from alcohol, which was really good to help heal my gut with celiac disease. I got my endoscopy, everything was good. And then I started drinking again after that break in May of last year, May of 2024. And now, I feel like I have a really good balance with things. I'm very intentional about the types of drinks that I have. I don't have sugary cocktails anymore. I feel so much better the next day. I have my electrolytes, and I make sure to eat something before I go to sleep. I do feel a lot better in terms of managing drinking alcohol socially and having celiac disease. I think when I completely cut it out, it was needed. But at the same time, being in my 20s in New York City, it was a little isolating sometimes, because I think a lot of social plans and events do revolve around alcohol. I think Gen Z is changing that a little bit, but it is fun to, go out with friends and have a drink or two. And I do think I kind of missed out on that experience. So I'm happy now that I've been able to find a balance. And a part of that is just ordering something that's very simple, low sugar, low inflammatory, and making sure I have my electrolytes and just staying on routine with things. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I do think everyone can benefit from a dry January or a little break from drinking, especially if you have an autoimmune disease. And it's not to be punishing, it's really to be empowering. It's kind of like a data gathering experiment. You're able to see how your body feels. I think it's so common for people to have never gone a full week without drinking alcohol once you get into your 20s, especially if you live in a big city, just because there's always an opportunity to drink, whether it's work-related, friend-related, family-related, holiday-related. There's always an opportunity to drink. Alcohol is everywhere. I feel like if I really wanted to, living in New York City, I could drink every single night socially. I could have free alcohol almost every single night socially. Alcohol is very accessible living in New York City. So I think sometimes people just get in the habit of drinking almost every day without really thinking about it. And I think abstaining from it from a full month really does just help you think more about how your body feels and think more about why you're drinking. I think it's helped me realize that like some situations I actually don't really need to have a drink, or it just helps me realize the benefits of not drinking and abstaining from a drink before the night before I go on a long run or something like that. So I just think it's a really cool time period to check in with your body. It's fun because a lot of people know what it is. A lot of people are doing it. So you're not going to feel socially isolated, and you can just kind of recalibrate your sleep, your energy, your inflammation, and reflect about how your body is feeling. I know this episode is all about dry January, but if you don't want to do dry January, I think it's still important to just kind of think about your relationship with alcohol a little bit. So I have, these few tips in general with celiac disease in terms of managing drinking that I've kind of shared, but just to reiterate, I think choosing those lower irritation options, so a sugar-free drink. Again, I love a martini. That's like my new drink of the year. Well, that was my drink of 2025. That's my new go-to drink. Make sure you're drinking water in between drinks. Make sure you're drinking on a non-empty stomach. I almost said empty stomach. That would be a no-no. And you're just hydrating throughout and listening to your body. So I think, this isn't about restriction. I just want to make that super clear. It's just about knowing your health, being honest with your health, being accountable to yourself and your body, taking care of yourself so that you feel your best and that you're able to perform and live your life and do the things that you want to do. Your body will communicate to you. And I just think it's important to think about these things because we all deserve to feel good with celiac disease and have fun and go out and live in our 20s in New York City or whatever life stage that you're at and just enjoy your life. So that is what I wanted to talk to you guys about with dry January and celiac disease and all of the above. I hope that this episode just made you think a little bit more about your relationship with alcohol and how drinking can affect your celiac disease, your long-term health, your present-day health, and just your life in general. Please let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode. My DMs are always open at Celiac Diaries Pod. Don't forget to give us a follow and make sure to rate the show. Leave us a 5-star review. And we're going to have a great 2026 over here at Celiac Diaries Podcast. I'm so excited. So share this episode with a friend, and I will see you guys here next Wednesday for another episode. Bye! Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Celiac Diaries podcast. I hope you're leaving with a tip, a story, or just a little inspiration to live your best life with celiac. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, or leave a review. I'll see you back here next Wednesday. And until then, stay well.